if the mind can only process 24 frames a second, but your intuition, which is linked to the Akasha, is linked with all things, then you're in danger if you're identifying with what the mind tries to show you. The same way that we like to identify with external events that we let define us is the same way that we identify with internal events which have nothing to do with our true higher selves. Meditation gifts us with the pre-sense or presence of inner standing through intuition that the mind cannot comprehend. There's a lecture you need to watch called The Mayan Calendar Comes North by Ian Zell Lungold. He breaks down the flicker analogy, which the CIA has been using against us for years, like PSYOPs. They understand that the mind, which is not your friend, nor should you be identifying with anything that the mind tries to show you as fact, can only process 24 frames or thoughts per second. Anything more than that, and the mind goes into stress, then fight or flight, and finally complete unconsciousness, where the mind shuts down so it doesn't have to deal with that thing that it can't find an answer for. See, the mind's only concern is similarities and differences and deciphering between the two so it can pick the best option. So if you find that you're identifying with mind, then you're operating on the lowest remnants of the Kundalini system, which is an imbalanced root chakra. More and more events are happening as the universe evolves with time. The mind is like a protective barrier to keep you existing. It doesn't assist with evolution. So those that are slaves of the mind cannot keep up with the times. You must tap into the intuition because intuition transcends mind. This is also a part of your higher self. They are two different operations, but they both exist within you. So if you spend enough time in meditation, you will be able to discern and assimilate the differences. In the lecture, Ian Zell Lungold talks about if anybody has had a near-death experience. And the reason why is for those that have experienced this sensation, you realize that the common denominator within all near-death experiences is that time seems to slow down. The reason why is because the mind wasn't able to give you a solution to the problem which has led you to this near-death experience. And so you were able to tap into your intuition zone. And the intuition zone is a part of the observer. You are the observer behind mind. You are the one that witnesses these things happening. And that higher self, which is the real you, took the driver's seat to find the exit route from death. Those who fail to tap into their intuition in a near-death experience are limited to the three-dimensional cage of mind, and ultimately death ensues. The mind came into existence 2 million years ago and is documented by the Mayan calendar. Yeah, there's about 3 Mayan calendars from what I know. Yeah, and the Mayans were taught this by the Olmecs. Yeah, those statues with the big fat noses. The first major cycle occurred 16.4 billion years ago. This is what the scientists refer to as the Big Bang, which is the material phenomena of the universe starting in transition. As we can see, science is still behind the ancient ones because the ancients denote this as the infinite all experiencing itself in motion as awareness. In each major cycle, there's always a cause and effect in order for the universe to process and understand what it needs to overcome so that we can smoothly transition into the next cycle. And the first cycle was all about action and reaction. Lots of chaos, the planets forming, and eventually the first cell. The second age started 820 million years ago and is referred to as the mammalian cycle, in which the cells transitioned to microscopic organisms, then sea life, and eventually invertebrates, life on land, and then mammals, all fending for themselves, figuring itself out. And this was all about stimulus and response. The next cycle after that is the familial cycle. And the familial cycle is all about monkeys, which came into transition 41 million years ago. Yeah, and this is where family was introduced, ways in which the universe is processing. Yeah, and what we had with this is stimulus and individual response. The next major cycle started 2 million years ago and is referred to as the tribal cycle. This is when the Australopithecus came into being, the first tailless ape. And what came with that is similarities and differences, aka the mind. So as you can see, the mind is a very primitive tool in a constant progressive steps toward evolution and where we are now. The only way to keep up with the current times is to leave mind behind and tap into your intuition. Yes, the mind has its uses, but you shouldn't be identifying with it, no. And before anyone wants to talk about Charles Darwin and racism, I'm referring to a civilization which wrote all of these cycles within cycles on a massive stone tablet 2,500 years ago. Charles Darwin wasn't around that long ago, in comparison. The Mayan civilization were taught this by the ancient Olmecans, and the Mayan civilization lasted 5,000 years before the Vatican and Pope Gregory introduced the Gregorian calendar in 1582. They murdered millions of indigenous people, just like the Spanish Inquisition, just like the Crusades, in order for you to follow the Gregorian calendar, which only has one concern, which is the Earth traveling around the sun. And it's also based off the Harb Mayan calendar, which deals with taxes, because they were an agrarian society. So people made money and there was taxes. But the way they dealt with taxes, was much different. There's a period of 52 days in their cycles in which all taxes were absolved. Everybody had a fresh start. And the Vatican knew this and turned it into something much more insidious. You must watch the lecture. Ian Zell-Lungold presented this lecture and died a year after he presented this. Why do you think that is? Does anybody question what day it is? Does anybody question the calendar that we use day by day, hour by hour? No, everybody's in universal agreement. And once you clock the history of this, by watching this lecture, you'll realize that we've all been duped, we've all been fooled. Our ancestors had more than just one calendar and didn't just observe the Earth's traveling around the sun. No, much more spiritual, higher dimensional faculties, which gave us more purpose and understanding of what we have come down here to do. One love, light, peace, and power.